Hi, and welcome back to Dollars and Dragons. Today I have with me Lucia Seersword. If you'd like to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, I'm Lucia, otherwise known as Seersword all over the internet. I'm here doing the work in the TTRPG space.
Doing the work, a powerhouse within the tabletop community. Let's
uh,
let's go back in time and let's talk about I'm gonna give you that old-fashioned question. How did you get started?
so I started off, I actually started off making dice, which was interesting. I started off making dice and I was sculpting like little things to put inside them because I wanted dice with like skulls in them and stuff like that. So I started off making those, and then it was decent enough money that I could start funding some other creative endeavors. So I started Sinuna in 2019, which is my pre-colonial Philippines inspired 5e supplement. So I started doing that, and it kind of just all snowballed from there. I built a team of all Filipino creators, and then we went to Indiegogo, and then we did that book, and it was super fun and super fulfilling and rewarding to be able to put something like that out. That I wanted to work with the team again. I wanted to keep kind of building on what I had built on. So we started Tales from Sinuna, which was a follow-up adventure anthology to the setting, and now that's what I'm working on. So
Yeah, I have to ask you about your Indiegogo campaign because the platform Indiegogo just is not it doesn't have the same oomph as a Kickstarter or now a backer kit in today's sort of crowdfunding platforms. And the support doesn't seem like it's really there for crowdfunding a lot of the time. And so it really requires that you bring your audience there. I'm curious, especially because it was ran in 2018, 2019, right? For that book?
yeah, it was
Okay.
2020
Okay, 2020?
specifically. Yeah,
Okay.
so right right in the end time.
Yeah. So did the pandemic had just started when you ran it, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. So my next question, just out of curiosity, like you going into it, did you know how it was gonna be for crowdfunding? Did you come in with a marketing plan? Did you have a marketer? Did you just figure it out and throw spaghetti at the wall? What happened?
So at the time, uh, we were going to run with Kickstarter, but Kickstarter was having some issues about unions. And I just didn't feel comfortable running the campaign there while they weren't giving support to the people working for them. So we decided to go with Indiegogo, which I wouldn't recommend. With peace and love. It certainly doesn't have the same audience, and the um aforementioned oomph really isn't there for it. But it was a big effort between myself and the team, and like posting it on Facebook to my family and being like, even if you can just spread it around a little bit, that would be great. But it was all just social media posts and me trying to push it on Twitter when it was still like useful.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there was no marketing team, no not much of that support. And then it was also before we were picked up by our publisher, Hit Point Press. So they sort of joined more officially after the Indiegogo ran. But it was really just me posting and getting the word out there about it. And it was an interesting experience that I now have.
Yeah, you must have I feel like you've probably taken, and I don't mean this like negatively, but like I guess it is negative no matter how I say this. Um, that feels like an experience that would have taken like some time off your life. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and I feel like this is a conversation a lot of creatives have in the space, which is like, I really don't want to crowdfund. I really don't want to crowdfund because it's so stressful and it's like for a lot of people too, I think it feels like you're essentially asking for money,
Hmm.
which you are. I mean, that's what it feels like, and it's already kind of a lot emotionally and even like physically too. Like I was physically exhausted, and being on Indiegogo more specifically was worse than Kickstarter because also on Indiegogo, the way that they run their back end is just a little bit different regarding like fees and how they charge cards, and they don't have the same like tried and true system built out that Kickstarter has. And now also like modern BackerKit being able to crowdfund on there. BackerKit already had kind of a foundation to lay out that they could go into crowdfunding, whereas Indiegogo is very bootstrapping.
Yeah. Yeah, you basically, it seems like Indiegogo is like you need to build up the platform and then they're just handling your straight fees.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it it was it certainly was one of those experiences that you have where you're like, okay, I will never do that again, ever. But now that I have that experience, I don't think much else could make it worse than that.
What what a terrible review for Indiegogo. Like this, it couldn't be
I
worse.
mean, with peace and love, but like it's just I think the platform is not built for TTRPG products the way
Right.
that like Kickstarter or BackerKit is. Like I think Indiegogo people find so much success there doing things like gadgets
Hmm.
and even like disability aids. I know a lot of people find a lot of success on Indiegogo doing things like that, or like with programs or sort of those items, but those aren't my specialty.
Hmm.
So for TTRPG people, it's like I I had my experience with Indiegogo. It wasn't like I still got the money and we still funded,
Hmm.
so I'm appreciative of that.
Hmm.
But knowing what we probably could have made with the project if we had gone with Kickstarter, despite, the union issue, is a little like, we could have
Sucks a little
probably,
bit, yeah.
yeah, we probably could have made a little more money, but
That's
it
always
is
the
what it is.
case. Yeah, that's always the case though. If you like stick to your ethics, you don't make as much money.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you don't win either way because
Yeah.
on one hand, you stick to your morals and you're like, I'm not going to support a company that does this. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, but if I would have gone with Kickstarter, I probably would have been able to have a bigger budget for the book and I would have been able to pay people more, or I would have gotten, a better product. So it's all it's all scales and balances, I guess, but that's how it happened.
Yeah. Gotcha. That's so cool though. So I get the impression that oftentimes you get asked about like, hey, or people tell you what an impact your work has been on like the Filipino community. I want to ask the opposite question. What impact has Sina Una and the community's response had on you?
Oh, uh, nobody's ever asked me that before.
I'm a
um,
professional interviewer.
I love it. Yeah, It's it's really strange to me, because being Filipino and being raised sort of under like American assimilation essentially meant that working on Sina was very eye-opening for me and very like it was kind of draining, to be honest, because it was I was learning a lot about my history and my heritage, and we had this saying on the team of like, oh, you think generational trauma is hard, try like ancestral trauma. Of this goes back to, Magellan, basically. And it was it was very eye-opening for me, and it meant that I got to kind of reconnect with being Filipino and in a completely different way than if I would have learned about everything post-colonial. And so for me, when we finished the first book, I was like, okay, I did that. That's part of my life forever. I don't know if I ever want to do it again. But the community, and especially my team, a lot of them are either from the Philippines or are closer, I think, started off closer to their heritage than I did. And what it meant for them to be able to work on it, and in a professional capacity, because a lot of people talk about trying to build up the community and give POC opportunities and tell these kinds of stories, but the positions aren't paid, or they're not paid enough, or they lack the experience, and whoever they're working under doesn't give them the opportunity to still try.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really why I ended up going and doing another one, because the joy of being able to provide that avenue was like made everything worth it. The Indiegogo funding and bringing up all of the trauma, and also just like the pain of production and doing all those sorts of things. It was really fulfilling in that way. And then as it kind of went out and it existed in the world, I had people come up to me and go, oh, well, because of Sina Una, you like opened up this avenue for us to be able to show these kinds of stories can be successful, not just like in making the community a more open space, but financially. The industry runs on money, and people want to make sure that, they can eat. And so being able to write these sorts of stories and put out these sorts of products, it was very, I think, I don't want to say that I paved any sort of road, because that feels very tooting of horn. But I will say, hearing from other people that it gave them the confidence to pursue those things, that has a big emotional effect on me, because that's really what I want, is to be able to make it more obvious to people that, these things can be successful and people want to hear them, and you should pursue them if that's what you want to do too. So
Yeah, a couple of things that you said really reminds me of a lot of the things that I've heard being said to professionals of color, and the whole bit about providing an opportunity that you should be thankful for, from like the publisher angle, I think is really, I think that's commonplace. And I'm not saying that you necessarily like have to name names, but like that feels like the most common thing when I talk to professionals of color is one of the most common stories that I get. from people is that publishers, when they're run by white people, are reaching out to people of color and expressing to them that, hey, I need you to take um, these 3 jobs and do them for one very underpaid position. And then you should be thankful for that because I am allowing a person of color to come into this space. When really the opposite is true,
Right.
in that the publisher needs people of color and needs these younger voices in order to stay relevant and to sell their merchandise.
Yeah, and that's also something that I've tried to subtly push, at least with my team, is an understanding and a work relationship that is, I am fully aware that I need you. It's not the other way around. And I don't ever want it to be the other way around when I'm running a project of, I need your story. I need you to be happy. I want you to feel respected. I want you to feel taken care of. Because if you have that experience with me, hey, I'm working out of my little apartment doing this stuff. And I'm trying to keep my wages fair. I want to make sure that it looks good on your resume, it looks good on your portfolio, and the fact that you're getting paid properly. When you go to these other companies, I want my team to be able to be like, this is kind of ridiculous that you're treating me this way or that you're not paying me this because this, small girl basically working out of her apartment treated me better, paid me better, or whatever it might be. Like, that expectation of professionalism and care, I really feel like that is part of my responsibility as a lead on these sorts of projects because, again, setting that standard for how you should be treated and then being able to go, hey, yeah, so I didn't take that job because they didn't treat me the way that Lucia did. That's what I want. And I feel like by providing that avenue for POC professionals to learn and to grow and to feel like they are a person who is valued while they work, ultimately will make the entirety of the industry healthier and get some people up to speed, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I found out earlier this year that my rates for art were 4 times that of a global publisher. It's like the second largest publisher in the
Yeah.
industry. And I found out I was paying like 4 times, and I was just like, what? I'm running this shit out of my garage.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
mean?
The other thing too about it is I know a lot of my team, they're so appreciative and they're so good at what they do. And there's been times where I'm like, hey, I'm going to be late, or I try to communicate with them whatever's going on. But the ultimate goal is, right, like following through on whatever you're promising. And it's the hardest part about it is convincing them that they're worth that a lot of the times, because it's like, they're like, oh, well, I don't have that much experience, or I don't have a big portfolio, or I don't have XYZ. And I'm like, no, I'm giving you the opportunity. Just say yes. Just take it. I'm giving it to you. I want to give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah,
And it's
go ahead.
it's definitely like building their self-worth too is part part of it, part of the hardest part about being a leader, because it's like trying to convince them. It's like, no, you deserve this much. You deserve it. And I want you to feel like you deserve it so that when you move past me and you go on to do bigger and better things, you know that you deserve that.
I always feel like it's a kind of a strange conversation to have with freelancers, is like that establishment of telling them like, hey, what are your normal, like I always ask this question because I know what the answer is going to be, but I'm always just curious. So I always ask them, it's like, okay, so what have you been paid in the past? I hear some horrific things, and then I tell them like what they're going to be paid, and they're just like, you mean to tell me that you're paying me like 3 or 4 times that of like people who are running like $1 billion IPs, you know?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, so it's actually not meant to be that I supply every freelancer with a living wage. It's just if you're going to work for me, the work that you do for those 2 to 3 days a month or whatever that you're working, I would like you to be paid a living wage. I just don't see it. I don't know. For me as a lead, I feel like it is my responsibility to find the money, and everyone else, like if I'm going to run the project, I need to find the money rather than coming up with the excuse that's convenient for me. It would be very convenient for me if I was just to be like, you know what? We're not going to make much money doing this, and I'm not going to make much money. Therefore, I will underpay you in the hopes that eventually you'll get paid a living wage. Like, when does that sort of routine stop between a publisher and the freelancer? In theory, it never stops because everyone keeps perpetuating this. It's basically wage theft, in my opinion. But it just seems ridiculous to me that part of the problem is that there are some publishers who have been so established in the scene, and they're doing certain things that make it very difficult for others to make enough for a living wage, especially with the economy as it is right now in the last like 15 years and how inflation has worked. And I remember when I first posted like my Kickstarter and I said that I was selling the hardbacks for $65, and people were so upset that I was going to charge that much, and they thought it was like the biggest crime against humanity. And then what happens? Which is
wild.
And what happens like 4 months later is the biggest publisher shifted because they saw the same exact thing that I saw, is that it's not sustainable to charge the same prices that we had in 2001. Like, it doesn't make sense economically at all when now the hash brown cost me $2 at McDonald's, like, or wherever. Like, it's just silly.
Absolutely. And you know, your point about like it's your job as the lead to find the money, that's what I try to tell people all the time, is there's no reason why the people who are under you should be scrounging whatsoever, and they should not be chasing you for what they're owed. And honestly, I think that as a lead, being the person who gets that money and who proves it, who's like, I'm gonna get it and I'm gonna give it out because that's what I want to do, that's so fulfilling to be able to do. Like, it's so, as somebody who grew up and didn't really have a lot of money and still has like personal, you know, personal habits around spending or not spending, it's so satisfying to me to find money and take it and then distribute it out to people, because it's like, I'm in a place where I can do that. I feel so incredibly fortunate to do that.
You are a river to your people.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't understand why people don't like doing that. That's like my favorite thing in the world. I love receiving invoices and I love paying them.
Yeah, I feel the same way. and that's part of like, uh, I obviously like I think in every leads position, I just had this conversation with James Hake on the podcast, and like becoming a lead for a project is like so stressful because there's no instruction manual. It's just like
Yeah.
some people have done it at some point, and the way that they've done it has become like ubiquitous with like this is what a professional does. When there's like really there's no formal training, there's no certification, there's no nothing. It's just like, can you conduct business in a way that people want to work with you or not? That's
Right.
really the only barometer of whether or not you're a good lead or not. Is do people want to do business with you again? And
Right.
did the product do well, or did you finish it on time? And I think for me, like, I know that I can recognize that I have definitely made some mistakes because I jumped on a project too large for me to do perfectly the first time, which is okay. And I think you and I share that history a little bit because your first project was massive as well. Um, and I just think for me, it's like when I changed my career and I moved into tabletop, I still work the day job of like running games for money, and that's like how I make most of my money, and I pay my bills and stuff, and make sure my kids are fed and stuff. But for me, like when I'm like leading projects and I'm writing and I'm doing game design and I'm doing all that, I personally am living my dream. And part of that is trying to build a community that also resembles a company. And I don't mean that in like a corporate speak way that like hey, we're a family. I'm not anybody.
Right.
I don't want to do that. Because that's just like what people use to whenever I hear that, it's always just like a corporation is going to try and eke more work out of you. But like for me, I'm most interested. And that's why my goal next year is like I want to make enough money next year to be able to hire 1 or 2 part-time employees on my leadership team. And so that they have that security. And then also I would like to pay, even if it's just a very basic healthcare plan, I would prefer to do that. And or dental or whatever that they need, or optometry or whatever. And for me, like moving from my first year in business was 52,000 after I changed my career. And then my second year, I'm crossing 110,000. Which includes the Kickstarter money, so it's like, okay, whatever, like all that money's accounted for, like, but it looks impressive. So like,
it is impressive.
Yeah, it is impressive to double your income as a business. However, I'm still poor as hell. So
that's real.
I'm still redlining it. Paycheck to paycheck. Here we go. But next year I would like to. I have like a tentative goal of like 150 to 170, which is beyond expectations. I don't expect that grow that much. But if I can get there, that means I can get healthcare for myself and a couple of other people on the team and provide some regular work hours. And I would like that's like my next thing. I would get so much joy out of that personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of leaders or people who want to be in leadership of like this capacity of running projects, that ideal should be your driving force. Like I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you're trying to get into it for the money, as far as like you're not gonna like it. You're not gonna like it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you'll be disappointed.
There is something, I'm trying to think of the right word, but there is something kind of fun and exhilarating about hustling a little bit.
Yeah.
But for the benefit of like your community and the people that you want to support. I tell people all the time, they're like, oh, well, Sina Una is like so successful, you must like make decent money. And I'm like, I really don't from from it. It's not successful, but the part of it that makes it successful for me is the fact that everybody on that project got paid.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
I do find that part fulfilling. I try and tell people jumping into it all the time. I'm like, hey, not to sound like your mom or anything, but you got to get into it for the right reasons. I'm trying to help you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like as long as I'm making enough, then I'll be fine. And unfortunately, I think for me, like one of the major reasons why like it's kind of stressful for me as far as like money is for healthcare because I would like to have surgery at some point. But
Right.
like, yeah, if I didn't need that, if I didn't feel like I needed that, then I would have a lot less concerns about money because genuinely for me it's like I love making money because it's a game to me and
Yeah.
I'm like playing the game of like is my product going to do well. Like we just released our adventure the Undead Gala and me like getting those email notifications of sales, I'm just like yes, another
Yeah.
$7 in my pocket that I can use to pay other people.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It was a great opportunity for me to partner with Kobold Press to do the adventure add-on that they did for Tales of the Valiant because they sold like a $25 add-on for their Kickstarter when they did the Tales of the Valiant thing, and 2,100 people bought it, and that meant that my adventure went out to 2,100 people plus the 700 who backed me. So my adventure is now in the hands of like 3,000 people, which is beyond the sales of like 99.9% of RPG products.
Yeah.
So of course I would like to do that, but I want to. I mean, it was from a business growing opportunity. It was probably the best opportunity I could have been given, and I wish more publishers did stuff like that, like Kobold Press did, because the way in which word of mouth and growing an audience works, it's incredibly difficult with all this noise out there. Yeah. So if there was a way for other publishers to do stuff like that, I would only, feel good feelings and like encourage that out of them, obviously. But yeah, I just wish there was more opportunity besides like I'm talking about James again because I just watched James's video about like how do you become a pro in the industry.
Yeah.
And they compared it to chopping like with a machete through the jungle and like you clear your path and then by the time you make it like the path is overgrown behind you because like everybody's path into the industry to become a pro is so different and there's no set path. There's no college, there's no course, there's no certification, there's no nothing. It's like a bunch of shit that you try until something works and then you've made it. But
yeah, it's I find that that's one of the things I try and offer when people come to me and they're like, "What do you think about this?" And I'll be super honest because to me it's like, if I can keep it open for whoever is trying to follow behind, that's my goal, like I consulted a little bit on Kaboa, which is a South American setting and has a great team. And they're really the advice that I've given them to try and help them get kind of where I want them to be so that they can succeed. They've really followed and like taken in stride. And I tell Adrian, the lead, all the time, I'm like, if there's ever anything that you need, ever, like, don't feel embarrassed to ask, because genuinely, I was embarrassed to ask, and I didn't have anybody to ask. So when it comes to like all of these, different situations that pops up, I am more than willing to be like, this is my honest experience. I'm going to give that to you because it is so, there's not a lot of like mentorship or programs, or it's not something you can go to school for really. it's very instinctual and it's very like baseline, like kind of street urchin stuff sometimes.
Yeah, that's real though. No, that's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kaboa team, fantastic. I mostly interact with like Sean and is that how you pronounce their name? Adrian?
That's how
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had a because we're both Global Press partners, so we're both in the Adventure Pack, so we interacted quite a
Yeah.
bit in that capacity, and it was really nice to see their adventure come out and like taking a look at it, and I was just like, I knew this was going to be the best adventure in the pack, and I'm just like, of course they fucking did this to me, like, um, me specifically, it's an attack on me, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm happy to know that you did some consulting work with them because yeah, wonderful team. I wish that more opportunities like that were available to South American creators.
Hmm.
I feel as though, like, based on my interactions with, so I have a Venezuelan artist, Yorsi, who does all of our portraits. So if you've seen like portraits of any of our villains, that's Yorsi.
Okay.
Except for the cover, that was Elaine. But and then I have an Argentine writer, Luna. The last name escapes me right now. But who wrote La Chismosa? And I feel like a lot of their community, at least in the TTRPG in South America, is like zines. And as much as I love zines, there's no money in zines.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what I'll call it the Kaboa effect will be in the next few years to see if that really takes off and if like their tabletop scene grows a little bit.
Yeah, it's I find that that's very similar for like the South American experience of like trying to get work in TTRPG is very similar to how it is for like South Asian creators and Southeast Asian creators. There's a lot of community, especially behind like Indian creators, which I find so heartwarming and joyous. There's a lot of TTRPG professionals who were all Indian who took a picture together at Big Bad Con, and it was like, oh, I wanted to cry. And same for the Sienuna team. A lot of them were there at Big Bad Con, and we all took a picture together. And I look at it sometimes, and I'm like, wow, this is like so impressive and exciting. But then at the same time, like while we were on the panel all together, Taylor Navarro took a moment to just like convey to the people in the room and to all of us too, like, this isn't the whole team. A lot of them can't be here because of visas or international travel or whatever it might be, but this product and this whole project and the whole like storyline of why it exists in the first place wouldn't exist without people who, you know, live in the global south or don't get the same opportunities. And it could be a multitude of factors of like money or travel or, you know, government, legal stuff, whatever it might be. And I find that a lot of people don't want to pursue people in those situations because it's more work.
Right.
And, you know, I can understand that to a point, but at the same time, it's like, well, but they're never gonna be able to get to the point where they are hireable to you if nobody takes the shot on them the first time. So I think for Sinuna and Kaboa, it's again another proving point of like, this works. these
Hmm.
people who don't normally have the same opportunities are just as capable. And if anything, a lot of them have such an incredible work ethic because they are so thankful and grateful for the opportunity that sometimes I'm like, no, like, you don't have to work so hard. Like, the standards are pretty, are like far below what you're doing. And it's kind of incredible to me to see them work and be so appreciative because there's been plenty of times I've worked with people who get these opportunities over and over and over again, and they don't see it the same way. Um, and of course, I want to get all of these people to a point where they don't have to feel like they have to work so hard all the time. But I think it's also just a like ingrained cultural idea of, you show up, you do the work, you do more than what you're expected so that I leave you a good reference and then you can move on and
Hmm.
keep doing that work. Um
Don't challenge the status quo.
yeah. And I think for especially Adrian, because he's closer to it, um like he's speaks the language, he can sort of like convey and communicate, and he's more than willing to do that. I don't speak Tagalog, so I have that working against me. um and it's really heartwarming to see him be able to do those things because he is closer. And it's also, I think, encouraging for more people following to be able to do that too. So,
It's interesting to think about in your situation. Like, I wonder how many kids are gonna see Sina Una as kids and play it as like one of their first role playing experiences because it's the only Filipino role play on the market, right? So it's like,
yeah.
um, I just wonder about that kind of cultural impact, and especially places like South America where um, there's just less of those. I guess big. I'll call them big ticket
Mhm.
publishing items, like they're doing with Kaboa. That I wonder what the impact is, and I think it's just unknowable at this point
Yeah.
because that sort of thing is really um, it's hard. It's just hard to know what the impact would be because if I look at like the white example, like I'll use my white culture card here for a moment. So if I think about like white culture, right, in tabletop, and I think about like Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft, right? Ravenloft, written in the regular i6 whatever module. I've never read it, but all these old white people love it, and
Right.
the cultural impact of that initial like Ravenloft writing, which was done in the 80s and the early 90s, um, has like basically spread to where Curse of Strahd now is the most popular adventure that Wizards has ever produced. And a
Hmm.
large part of that was the cultural impact and like the sort of rolling impact or the influence that grew over time. Because when one person says that they had a good experience with something, then they move on to the next person and then they tell them about that, and then more people know about it, and so on and so forth. So it kind of like spreads like a
Yeah.
virus. So
Yeah. Yeah, I find it very interesting some of the experiences that people have told me about playing Xenona. A lot of my team have told me that they bring it over to like their family and bring it to like Thanksgiving and they go through it together.
that's so
And
cool.
it's also specifically for what we're doing, it's really eye-opening, I think, for a lot of Filipinos because they only know the Philippines post-colonial.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were times even when I was talking to my Lola about her experience, or my grandma about what it was like for her growing up in the Philippines. And there were certain things that she didn't want to talk about because of the influence that colonization had on the country and the religion and the culture at large. And it was kind of difficult because I had to tell her, I was like, no, like, you shouldn't be ashamed of these things. Like, these are indigenous practices that are interesting and deserve to be preserved somehow. And it was like, I tell Mackenzie Darmus, who worked on the first book and then went on to work at Wizards. Bless her. She, I was having a conversation with her a little bit ago where I was like, yeah, you know, the two of us are basically like, we're like scholars at pre-colonial Philippines at this point, because there's really not like any other qualifications for it. And the book has sources listed in it because I was like, I feel like other people should know where to get this information. But as a whole, it kind of acts like a big glossary of just mythos and history in its own way, that it's kind of the most accessible, almost like a thesis on the culture. I was writing for the deities in the first book, and I really wanted to include a specific deity, and I couldn't find anything on it. And so I started digging around, and I figured out that one of the main sources that it had been sort of listed by was this book. There was like only 3 copies in the entirety of the United States. And so I looked around for where those were, and one of them was in Chicago at the library there. And so we reached out to them and we were like, hey, it's COVID time currently, so nobody's going to the library. Could we set up some sort of meetup, like really low key? We'll pay to check out the book, basically, but to take it, because we want to, like, it's our one resource that we have. Like, it's the one piece of research we need. And they wrote back and they offered to scan up to 50 pages of it for us and send it over. And we were like, oh my gosh, this feels like like national treasure, like secret mission stuff. I don't know. It was so it really made it feel like this pursuit of knowledge. And I tell people sometimes, I'm like, if you're not like into it that way, like, you gotta have some fun with it to pursue it to those ends, because it's you have to.
Yeah, that's super cool. The amount of care and dedication that you and the rest of the team really put forward for the book itself. I had I was looking through the book, and the amount of detail that's provided in it is really just stuff that you would not find in a regular source book,
Right.
in a campaign guide and source book, in a setting guide. And the amount of stuff that's in there's a lot. It feels like it's one of those really old school, you need to know everything to run a simulation type of game for this. Whereas I know a lot of 5e source books have kind of moved away from it. But you and the team have put so much into Sina Una that it feels like, even as a white person, I would feel comfortable running it, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that was the goal too of like giving people the comfort of, because there's not a lot of, resources to otherwise be able to research this topic and make people comfortable. Part of our responsibility is essentially making it known and making it comfortable, because at this day and age, I'm more than positive you could ask any GM to run a game in the Roman Empire and they could do it in a couple days. So they would have it done.
Yeah,
Or
I start thinking about the Roman Empire, yeah.
right, the Roman Empire, or like Norse mythology
Mm-hmm,
has
mm-hmm.
seen this huge resurgence and people
Yeah.
love it. All of those things, like, you can find them all over the internet. A lot of colonized countries, especially, have this issue where if websites talk about the culture, it feels almost taboo. And that was sort of what I was trying to convey to the team too, was I was like, there were certain things where I was trying to get an understanding of something, like animism or their rituals or whatever it might have been. And I had to tell the team, I was like, I want you to include those things. I want you to be able to express fully what you mean, but I need you to explain it to me like I have no idea, because the people who are going to pick up this book, they have no idea. And in part, like, that's kind of the fun part to me, is for people to be like, yeah, this was my first introduction to Filipino culture or mythology. I had no idea about any of this stuff. Because in truth, like, when I started it, I had no idea. Showing people, like, it's a good place to start and it's accessible, and we tried to make it as detailed as possible so that, Filipino culture could get to a place where it feels like the Roman Empire, like, and it's out there. That's always part of the goalpost of, like, making it normal.
Yeah. The only, I guess, and this is totally like me just attempting my best to like see into your perspective briefly. But whenever I look into Irish history, which is primarily like what I am, I see a lot of the similar things, because they as well, the Irish people dealt with a lot of issues from the same colonizer state that a lot of different countries dealt with, and a lot of that Irish culture just doesn't exist anymore, because
Right.
it was wiped away by the empire. So it does feel like very strange for me to like see a lot of Irish culture just reduced to like St. Patrick's Day. Like, let's get drunk and like wear green or whatever, and like it, and knowing the unfortunate like history of like the Irish people coming to America, and a lot of them feeling like they had no choice but to uh, take the only job that they could probably get and earn some sort of like respect from the system by becoming a part of the system. And a lot of Irish people became cops,
Right.
and like sort of reinforce the status quo of the government itself that was allowing for their people to be oppressed in a way. And a lot of their culture was basically destroyed by a majority of the community coming over and just signing up to hit people with billy clubs. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah, and to that, like, relatability too, it's something that I think is like a really unfortunate byproduct of like white supremacy, especially in America, of there's this system in place that's like, well, if you're oppressed, just oppress the person one rung below you, and eventually the white supremacy will accept you into itself because you're also acting as an oppressor. And like to that point, my husband's Irish, and we have this conversation a lot, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Where we kind of compare experiences, and I tell him all the time, I'm like, I think it's so tragic that originally, when a lot of Irish people immigrated here or were brought here by whatever factors that made it, that was their only avenue. At first, like, they weren't considered part of the, the white elite or whatever. And it was this like system that just continued, where at the beginning of America, like, you were Italian or you were Irish or you were more specific to these places, and you had your own culture and you had your own community. And then as the system just continued to grow into like this ginormous monster, it just like brings people in of like, okay, who do we step on so that we can get up a little bit and just take a little bit of the weight off of our shoulders. And I find that with Filipinos sometimes too, where I'm like, hey, baby, you are brown just like the rest of us. They're not going to look past that. And it's difficult sometimes because, it's like, I find there's a subsection of the Filipino community that's anti-Black, and it's so frustrating because obviously to me it's like, if we all just like banded together and we just like made the difference, neither of us would be feeling it. I feel so similarly about like the erasure of so many cultures, and like Irish culture too is so rich and so, it is so much more than like St. Patrick's Day and like leprechauns and all of the kind of stereotypes it gets reduced to. And I feel so similarly about, about my own culture, where I tell people I'm Filipino and they're like, oh, I love lumpia and pancit, and it's like,
Yeah.
You don't know anything else?
Yeah. I actually, I'm about to repeat you, I guess. I talk with my partner about this, who's Black, and
yeah,
her family was from the mostly from the islands, though, so it's a different kind of a different sort of American Black history for her, and the sort of the experience of, I'm learning so much about Black culture since we've been dating now for a year and a half almost.
Yeah.
And I've been learning so much about like Black culture and how that sort of intersects. And one of the things that does come up is like, whenever my girlfriend knows all the gossip about everybody, all the celebrities. So like, if there's a celebrity who's a person of color but is like a racist or something like that, like, my girlfriend lets me know.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of those people, and I was just talking about at least about like Hollywood actors and things like that. There are certain people within some of these industries or these centers of power, and you see it amongst, like, at least in my community, like the queer community, those gays who think that the Republicans aren't going to come for them. And
Mm.
like, you know, like it's just so odd to me that it's like you can, and I'm not saying that I'm immune to this, because I've definitely like done a lot of stuff in my life to where I was attempting so much. The white supremacy is so like ubiquitous with our culture,
Yeah.
in our systems, that it's difficult to know where it is and recognize it a lot of the time, because we would just see it as normal.
Right.
So it's difficult to divorce yourself from that in our everyday lives, for sure.
It is. And it's also it's such a like it's such a slippery slope that, and it can happen so fast because the like especially the alt-right pipeline is so accessible and so easy to fall into. You could make a white supremacist from one PewDiePie video showing up in a YouTube recommended for a young boy or you know, whoever. And it's difficult to, like, in relation to the industry of TTRPG sometimes, because it's so like deeply rooted in everybody. And especially, I find especially for people who are based in the US and the UK, where they won't necessarily like feed into the supremacy, but it's almost like they degrade themselves enough to get by unscathed, which is also harmful and incredibly draining. Like, it's either you keep your head down and you're safe, but then you're going against what you truly believe in and it makes you feel so small, or you take up space, but all around you is harm. And it's like the more space that you take up, the further the like glass shards kind of dig in, kind of like like such a bad movie, but in Multiverse of Madness, when Wanda's stuck in that like mirror dimension thing.
Yeah.
And it's and I get it. I get both perspectives of how, you know, especially in the industry of TTRPGs, because it's so chatty and people are, it's hard to make the right decisions or feel like you're making the right decisions. And I understand both perspectives of either I'm going to keep my head down and I'm not going to get hurt because I work better and I can do more if I'm okay. And then there's also the perspective of like, no, it's my responsibility to say something and to take that, like, the brunt of it so that I can make it a little bit easier for people that I'm shielding. And I find so often that a lot of drama and a lot of the discourse that happens around these like really sensitive subjects, they would all be a lot easier if I think people realized that there are two paths, I think, that you can sort of take. And one of them is, and it's just a matter of how comfortable you are and how you've learned to survive, because it's not easy for people to say something all the time, especially when it puts you in this like targeted spot of harassment. And then at the same time, there are some people who are like, well, if I'm not hurting from people saying something to me, or if I'm not taking the pain, then I'm not doing anything. Like, the two of them, it's like, I think actually teaming up both of those perspectives would be so helpful and beneficial to everyone.
Yeah.
But emotions run high, and it makes sense why things don't always get communicated the way that I feel like they should. But
Yeah.
I think all in all, like leading with kindness and some understanding and consideration is nice.
But usually the best way forward. Yeah, I want to talk about that specifically from like because we're talking about like the establishment, right? So me as a white creator who's running the project, who controls the money, right?
Mhm.
I understand that I have a disproportionate power dynamic between me and everybody else on the project. Because that's how it
Mhm.
works, because I pay them, right? So for someone to come to me with an issue or a problem or something like that, it takes a lot of guts for someone to confront me on something.
Yeah.
And so I think that for um, a lot of these white project leads or these white producers or people within uh, the publishers, they just aren't aware of what it actually takes out of a marginalized person to confront them or to bring up an issue,
Right.
and they don't believe that there's a problem because they're not open to problems,
Right.
and they don't present an environment that allows people to be able to come to them to tell them that there is an issue.
Yeah, and as a lead, I try and convey that to the people that I work with because it's so it's so incredibly scary and it's so incredibly vulnerable to voice an issue or to have the courage to say no, I don't like this, or this is making me uncomfortable, or I need help with something. I think a lot of people don't really realize that for a lot of marginalized creators, they don't normally have those avenues to say something. Or again, it's like, okay, if I do say something, I'm going to get hurt, or I'll keep my head down and I'll, deal with it, whatever. I think on a lot of leads, I try to tell them you have to be extremely clear. Like you have to really lay it on thick. Like it's totally safe for you to tell me that you don't like something. And it's more than okay for you to say, hey, especially with me, like for a project that's so culturally sensitive, of like, hey, Lucia, like you're being disrespectful, or I feel like I'm being treated poorly, which thankfully hasn't happened yet. But I also find as a lead, I'm the one talking to publishers or I'm the one talking to, bigger names to get things out there. And there will be times where it's not necessarily a mistake on anybody on the team's fault, but just because, it's inexperience or they weren't sure or they felt too embarrassed to ask. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, if somebody is going to yell at you, I will be your scapegoat. I don't care. They can yell at me all they want. But if it comes to you and your comfortability, I will go to bat for that. I'm typically the type of person who tries to stay out of conflict, but when it comes to people that are working under me, the least I can do is offer that amount of solace of like, it's not necessarily that I don't want you to be responsible for like the mistakes that you make, but when it comes to things like, okay, somebody's just like harassing you for no reason, um, sick me on them because I will take care of it.
Yeah, yeah, that bad bitch persona comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Full guard dog.
Yeah, I think it's especially difficult, I think, with, and this is a conversation that I've had with many creators, unfortunately, many people, professionals in the industry. Um, and part of that problem is that part of the problem of a lot of these professionals is that people of marginalized identities feel as though they have no one to trust that they can bring problems to.
Right.
So the number one thing that they deal with is harassment from other professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's private harassment. So
Yep.
how do you deal with that when the person on my team that has X number of years of like professional experience and is incredibly valuable to the team, incredibly valuable to the company, how am I going to bring this up that they either sexually harassed me or made inappropriate comments or like did this thing, because it could turn into like I'm out of work. I'm out of this
Right.
gig. I can't
Mm-hmm.
do this anymore because I chose to speak up about this. And there are so many people on the internet as well who want to put their 2 cents in about
Right.
these sensitive topics. And so like for instance, like if we have like a president of a company who is outed as like an abuser or like a sex pest, like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that took so much guts from that individual. And then what happened, of course, is like we have it went nowhere essentially.
Right.
No seemingly no consequences for
Mm-hmm.
that person. Um and then the person who came out and was the whistleblower, of course, doesn't work there anymore. Um had charges brought against them legally. And like all of this stuff because the establishment and people of the establishment, people with money, mostly men, white
Right.
men, have that ability to silence people of marginalized identities. So it's like, how do you? Yeah, I don't know. It's one of the reasons why like some of the stories that I hear about these artists, for instance, and that person is okay with being public with it. So I don't know if like anything will come of this. But I started working with an artist who was full time with them,
Mm.
signed a non compete contract,
Mm-hmm.
was working 60 to 80 hours a week, right, as an
Mm-hmm.
artist, couldn't take additional work, was being paid under the poverty line for their state.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked for more money after working for them for a year or two so that they could survive, right, and buy groceries, and they got
Mm-hmm.
fired.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the industry as a whole, I think, is often underestimated for how cruel it can be and how I cutthroat feels a little extreme, but it really is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like this is people's livelihoods, and for people like me and Adrian, this is our culture.
Mm-hmm.
For people who are writing about their queer identity, like that's their life. And I I find very often that people just get to this place in the industry where either they've gone through without repercussions for so long that they don't even see them anymore,
Mm-hmm.
or they're so wounded from the ways that they've been treated that then, it starts reflecting off of them because it's the only defense mechanism that they have. And I think that's why I tend to try and stay out of things because, like, I try and kind of live by the famous quote or whatever that's like, it's not a weakness to be kind. It's actually the strongest thing that you can do. And even like referencing Everything Everywhere All at Once, where Waylon talks about how him being nice and being excited and being happy in life is his version of fighting, I think really kind of conveys, to me at least, the ultimate goal of what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to instill in people, of like, at the end of the day, this industry is about games, y'all. Like, things that have been around since like the dawn of the ages, that you sit around with friends and people that you love and you play and you interact and you tell stories. Oral tradition continues through things like role-playing games. And similarly for, Sinuna specifically, a lot of our texts were lost. We didn't really even have texts because of the way that traditions were passed on by just talking to each other. And I think telling people at the end of the day that like the most you can always do is just care enough to listen and do something when the time comes, and knowing that that is your version of fighting is kindness. Like, that's what I try to lead by, and I hope other people try to live by. But it can be draining to have that version of strength, I guess. Not to say that I'm myself very, very strong and valiant and noble, but but I again, like, it's about games. People just want to make games and have fun, and all of this extra stuff is like, yeah, it's so difficult and it's so annoying, honestly. But it's necessary to the end of it, and it's a good avenue to do those things.
Everything that you just said was so beautiful, by the way, but I feel like that's the thing for like these independent publishers, that I feel like I have this personal responsibility now for my company and the people that I work with. And I'm just a one employee company at this point, and I just hire a bunch of freelancers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I now can run successful crowdfunding campaigns, so I can actually pay the freelancers.
Yeah.
And a large part of that for me is like when I left the most white supremacist organization in the United States, which is the military, I decided that I not only wanted to just do what I wanted, as in like, what do I want to do in my life?
Mm-hmm.
Because my life was really on hold, just being in the Marines the entire time and like doing what I was told to assimilate and survive and do a good job. And at the end of it, genuinely, Marine Corps didn't give a fuck about me.
Mm-hmm.
I got a mostly like sort of ragged body. I have a lot of mental trauma. I have a lot of just problems. And when the day that I stopped being useful to the Marine Corps, they stopped caring about me. And I don't want to run my company or live my life that way anymore. And a large part of me running my company, the way that I try to, and I don't always succeed, I think all of us make mistakes, and I'm willing to own those things. But the way that I try to run my company is that um, I want to ideally build a place that people love working at so much
Yeah.
that they would like, I have created a dream for them too. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah,
are living their dream.
absolutely. And like, to your credit, I think what a lot of what I try to communicate with a lot of industry professionals, especially those in leadership roles, is that I try to tell them whatever standard that you're setting for yourself, you are setting for your community and for your industry. So being passionate about proper wages and a healthy work environment and following through with that and showing the rest of the industry that it's possible and that it turns out the best possible product is so important. And it's one of the responsibilities that we all have to each other to make it better. And I try I try to tell people, I'm like, I know that you think you're getting under like an immense amount of pressure, and I don't want to be discouraging, but it's actually more than you think. And I just want you to be prepared for that because like for Sinuna specifically, I tell people all the time, I'm like, if we would have failed, if I would have failed, I would have knocked over so many dominoes for people trying to do the same thing. Because it's like when one brown girl messes up, every brown girl messes up. And it's not just Filipinos, it's whoever else wanted to do something similar. And for you, like running your Kickstarter and being so open and honest and earnest about, no, this is what I'm paying people, this is what they deserve. Like, it's incredible to see and have you find success in that because it proves to the industry that it works. And I think that having more people kind of on the front lines working towards those things and actually making it happen is so impressive, and it's so refreshing to see, because there are some projects where I'm like, you know, because you didn't follow through on that, you just made it so much harder for people behind you. And I don't think people really realize that. And it's an unfortunate, like, byproduct of the way that the industry works. But it's also so necessary to consider because, again, like, I don't just mess it up for me. I mess it up for a lot of other people. And I think that you really did come into like your projects like talking about the issue but then actually addressing it, which is rare for the industry. So
thank you for all of those kind words. I will say, would never have gotten this far without immense help and lift from other people
oh
who
yeah.
believed in me and uplifted me. And my first business partner in this was M. Ebel, Michaela Ebel, who did, co-writer on Rime of the Frost Maiden. We had like a business relationship because I was the marketer on One Night Straw, and then we continued from there. And actually, the way I met M was actually I did a business consult with M before I worked with them on anything, and I just hired them to help me create a more sensitive and appropriate and not terrible plot for my home game that I was streaming.
Yeah.
And that home game became the basis for the Vineyard. And so I asked if they wanted to come on, and they said yes graciously. And so that's how M became my co-creator. And I learned so much from people like M, and I had a wonderful experience working for Jasmine Buller. And I had all of these people who were very generous with their time to mentor and to teach me, some of whom are like 10 years younger than me, but they've been doing the things, that you're doing at a very young age. And I think I am so impressed with your generation and the things that you all like. I feel like a lot of the things that we wanted to do as millennials, as a lot of us have just actually just gave into the status quo at some point, but you all are still dreamers, and I really just love that about your generation. And the thing is about the way that the industry is and going back to our conversation, or the topic of it's my responsibility to find the money. I know full and well that I knew full and well going into the Vineyard RPG crowdfunding campaign. I could have set it at 10,000 to gain the algorithm and try and earn more. But the problem was the scope and the pay scale that I was applying to artists and writers and everyone meant that it's $100,000 book. Vineyard RPG is $100,000 book. I only earned $58,000 from Kickstarter. We've earned a few thousand more on BackerKit. So basically that means I'm $40,000 in the hole for what I want and how I want to move forward. So for me, it's my responsibility as an investment to move forward with that. Yet all of these other businesses that I see, and perhaps that's, what they're run a business how they want to run business. But I have a problem with people who run business in a way that their scope and their ambition really outweighs the measure at which, or the amount of strength that they're going to put into delivering.
Right.
And people's ambition often outweighs their goodwill, when really you should be meeting in the middle. If you want the best book that you can possibly make, you should be willing to pay the best in the industry, or you should be able to willing to pay at least equitable wages, right?
Right.
That's how I feel about it. If I wanted Vineyard RPG to just be any other setting and guidebook that we just sell a few and I move on to the next thing and I try and do something else that's, my baby or whatever, that's fine. But that's not what I'm doing.
Right.
So I feel like that seems like the cost of doing business to me. And that's how I look at it. And I wish more people did, but not enough people do, because I guess they feel like they should be the CEO when they really shouldn't.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a difficult line to toe between, okay, I have to make enough for it to be successful, and I have to prove that it makes money, because that's really where people's eyes are. But behind the scenes, and I'm sure this is true for you too, the thing that I'm investing my money in is people. And being able to see them go from, this is their first experience, they had such a good time, they loved it so much, now they're going on to do other things. In truth, that's, again, the most fulfilling part for me. And I think when you have people who are only driven by the ambition of the money, the numbers, what can they make, you get products that they're not bad, but you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's if that's the way that you want to run things and you're upfront about it, then by all means, like I'm sure people are up for that. Because for a lot of people in the industry, it's not emotional. They just write their games and they put them out and they're good to go. They're fine. They don't have any other like personal investment. They don't care, or they're completely like closed off from it. Which, hey, I'm jealous. But I think for what it comes down to of like, and also speaking to like other people's generosity of giving you opportunities or resources or mentorship, like being able to return that in some degree of, well, I can't teach my mentor something because you know more than me, but what I can at least do is take your knowledge and give it to other people so that they can give it to other people and they can give it to other people. And like I feel it now with my producer Taylor Navarro. She's incredible. I mean, she's a superstar. She's so talented and dutiful and responsible and smart and oh my god, like she changed my life literally. And if she heard me talking about her like this, she would tell me to shut up. um but like she's and this is her first like real go at it, and she just gets it. She gets me. She gets everything. Like I trust her completely. I trust her with my life. I trust her with my, I mean, Sinuna kind of is my child, so I'm trusting her with my child. But like, it's so, like, I tell people a lot, like the industry's kind of harrowing and it can be scary and sometimes it hurts and whatever, but being able to work with somebody like Taylor and seeing her like flourish in her element and like do all of these things that look so good on her resume. Like I'll tell people all the time, I'm like, yeah, if you're thinking about hiring Taylor, like you better be paying her the big frickin' bucks because she deserves it. She will go above and beyond whatever you give her. Like that part of it. If you're in it for that, you'll love it forever because seeing people succeed is like more fulfilling to me than counting numbers.
Yeah. It's kind of like a hashtag TTRPG community, but actually a community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's community in the most like I don't even know. Like I hate to do the corporate like we're a family thing cuz you know or like we're a tribe. Ugh.
Right.
That's yucky.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because it's intimate and it's raw and it's like you have worked on something together that you've put so much effort into, and it's like
yeah.
it's a part of you and who you are, and you have chosen as a creative to lead your life this way. I feel the same way. So I mean, like that's how I feel about business. Is
Yeah.
like I'm not in it for like I don't know, like if I wanted to make money, I would have picked a different career. I will tell you that much. I'll tell you that much. Like I would have definitely picked a different career. But yeah. As much as I get tired and like I get worn out at some points, yeah, I'm very happy with doing what I do And I hope to bring as many people as I can along with me.
The more people that are out there that think that way and act that way and pursue those types of avenues, I think the better off we'll probably all be. So it's nice to have pillars in the community. It's nice to have people in the community and connection, and not like business connections. I mean, obviously those are nice too, but like genuine a understanding between two human beings who are like, hey, this kind of sucks, right? We should maybe do something about that.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place for us to stop.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on, Lucia. I want to direct everyone to the show notes, sinauna.com, seersword.com. Hire Lucia for stuff, and you'll get a great product.